Well, for anyone who follows the intersection of national security, intelligence, and emerging technology, today's guest is one of the people who helped shape the modern innovation ecosystem that supports U.S. intelligence. Gilman Louie has spent decades operating at the crossroads of Silicon Valley and the national security community. He was the first CEO of In-Q-Tel, the strategic venture capital firm created to help the Central Intelligence Agency and the broader intelligence community identify and then invest in cutting edge technologies that were coming out of the private sector. Now, under his leadership, In-Q-Tel helped pioneer a model that connected startups and venture capital to some of the government's most complex intelligence challenges. Before that, Gilman built a successful career in the technology industry, including leading a pioneering gaming company, which helped bring sophisticated computer simulation and gaming technology into the mainstream. And we're going to get into the weeds on that nerdy aspect of his life. Today, he's the co-founder and managing partner of America's Frontier Fund, a venture capital firm focused on investments in frontier technologies, from artificial intelligence and cybersecurity to advanced computing, many of which have profound implications, of course, for national security. And here's the big news. The Cipher Brief is honoring Gilman for his impact in investment at this year's Cipher Brief Awards dinner. You can find out more details on that at cipherbriefhonors.com. Gilman Louie, welcome to State Secrets.
It's good to see you again, Suzanne.
It's so good to see you too. What's it like listening to people sum up your entire career in a few paragraphs?
You know, we were joking. I was out with Louis Shepard and his wife here in San Francisco. And Louis, of course, is a major pioneer and pathfinder at institutions like DIA and the Department of War and in the intelligence community. And we kind of joke that the awards we get, particularly these achievement awards, is that really the award you get, like the gold watch before they push you out the door? Or is it a sign of the bigger challenges are yet to come? So,
well, I think if you just look back on your career, you have always advanced to the bigger challenges. I mean, you have never shied away from the difficult questions. I mean, to that point, let me just start by asking you, let's start sort of roll back the time clock a minute. When you launched In-Q-Tel, I'm really interested to know back at the beginning, what was the problem that the intelligence community was really trying to solve that it created a venture capital firm for?
you know, I give credit to the CIA, who was at that time. We got to go back to 1998, is when the ideas started forming in folks' heads about what we should be doing, what we needed to do, and how technology was going to play a role. And I give total credit to Ruth David and Joanne Isham, who were thinking through this problem. And Ruth was at that time the DDS&T, and Joanne was her deputy. And they came to this realization that as impactful and powerful as our defense industrial base is and has been to national security and the intelligence community, the action of where all the new technologies were being developed in Silicon Valley, not for the Defense Department, but for consumer and enterprise applications. And they had a gap. And that gap was the ability to reach out and affect how that technology was being developed in a way that was useful to national security. So that was problem number one. Second problem they were really afraid of was, at that time, this is pre 9/11, before DNI and DHS even existed. There was a concern that the information was being fragmented across the variety of collections across the intelligence community. And it would be just a matter of time that we will face another kind of moment. At that time, we shaped it as the digital Pearl Harbor moment. And that wasn't about a kid in the Philippines doing a cyber attack. More about, we had all the information of an imminent attack, but we couldn't put the pieces together. And that was prescient in 1999 because they were really worried about 9/11. And so they said, look, we got to get these technologies and integrate it and modernize our intelligence services so we can get the pieces put together to provide not only our analysis, but the tools of warning that we'll need to have. And the current, at that time, 1999, we didn't have the tools to put all that information, fuse that information flow to give warning in the real time. So those two factors kind of drove this need to get engaged with the Valley and the other tech centers throughout the nation.
It's such a gut punch when you think that we could see where the gap was, but we didn't have the ability to respond quickly enough to keep 9/11 from happening.
Yeah. And in retrospect, it was just like Pearl Harbor, December 7th, right? That in retrospect, you realize you had all the pieces, but you again, you couldn't fuse it, you couldn't put it together in a meaningful way. And so that modernization effort began, at that time, led by the S&T and CIA. And I'm often asked, why the CIA? Why not the Department of War? Or why not Commerce? Or, why not the executive branch of the White House? And the answer is, to have done so in 1999 required great insight and the willingness to take great risks. And at that time, remember, George Tenet was just coming in as DCI. And taking risks was something that the agency kind of forgot about in that time frame, and they needed to get back into that game. And taking risks was necessary in order to achieve the goal. And quite frankly, the CIA was one of the few organizations, probably the only organization at that time, who could have pulled off the creation of an In-Q-Tel.
I'm going to put you on the spot because it's a podcast and I can. We talked to George. We talked to George Tenet about you, Gilman.
Oh, that could be a good or bad thing. So,
what do you think? What do you think he told us?
Oh, wow. Look, here's what I do know about George, is that he's committed his career to national service. And I think from the first day I met him, which is a story unto itself, the first day I met him, it was really, really clear to me he was looking for a generation of leaders that he can convince to come solve tough problems for the nation. So I'm hopeful that he said that I would have at least qualified or met the mark of what he was looking for.
You said that in a little better, but I'm not going to share the details on it until the Cipher Brief Honors Dinner. But I am going to post it so everyone listening to the podcast can the Cipher Brief YouTube channel, because it's pretty impressive. Gilman, we're now living in this era where the most important technologies are being developed in the private sector. We now, under President Trump, have a Department of War, Department of Defense, whatever you want to call it, that is really changing the way that technologies can be brought to the mission directly. This is a passionate area for you. You're spending a lot of your time now in your current role focused on identifying these technologies and getting them into government. Let me ask you, given what we've seen so far with some of the changes to the acquisition process, where do you think the strengths are in keeping America competitive with its adversaries? And then where do you still see some gaps?
Well, clearly the innovation strength of our nation is one of our shining capabilities that the rest of the world envies, right? And that's not to disparage technologies that are being developed in places like China and Europe and the rest of the world. But in most parts, not in every part, in most parts, that innovation engine still happens here in the U.S. And the Department of War, together with the intelligence community, has unique access to that technology to build out capabilities. And that's been true for the last 60 or 70 years. We hope it's true for the next 70 years. But it's the thing that's kept us ahead. And it's not just the innovation of the technology itself, but the innovation process itself. The ability to ideate, to put to practice, to build out the infrastructure, to get the talent to build these things that help defend the nation. And this not from a military and kinetic point of view, but economically, right? I mean, without the economic backbone of the United States, you cannot fund the necessary things you need to protect yourself and your interests. Now, where are the gaps? The, the gap we have today, we have several. The first gap we have is that we have built a system that prioritizes a process over outcomes. And because of that, that's not to say that we don't need processes, but those processes are now so bureaucratic, so slow, that it's no longer competitive in a world where you have strategic competition, particularly from a nation like China. Your second thing that we did, unfortunately, in order to increase our efficiency in our industrial base, we decided to have this mindset of just-in-time capabilities that we thought we can simply purchase abroad in the globalized world. And while you can have a debate whether or not globalization is a good thing or a bad thing, by completely depleting your ability to build, puts us in this precarious position that we find ourselves literally today when people are talking about, do we have enough munitions to sustain a fight? We're not talking about for years, but for weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Particularly with what's happening in the Middle East, right?
Right. And so if the Middle East is the problem, we, God forbid, there should be a conflict in the South China Seas, right? And now all of this is happening at the same time, puts us in the world of pain. And so that inability to build things again could be our destruction, because if you look at World War II, at the start of World War II, the best technologies really were being created out of the Axis, not by the Allies. You know, Germany particularly had much more innovative weapon systems than the United States ever did, right? They had better tanks at the start of the war, better aircraft, right? They were the powerhouse. But what did the U.S. beat them with? A process, our speed of innovation, our speed to put in production, our ability to manufacture at scale. Now, look at where we are today. Who looks more like Germany, the US or China? So we have the exquisite.
Yeah.
They have the ability to manufacture.
Yeah.
They have the process. We don't.
So that's going to be the next critical gap to fill.
We have to fill that gap in a hurry.
Gilman, when you think about sort of this speed and this competition between the US and China, I know you've sat on, frankly, I lost count of how many like boards you have sat on for Congress and trying to understand AI better, for the government, for a lot of the intelligence agencies. You're a regularly sought after voice on these things. And I've asked you this question before in the research for China. How do you actually know who is winning? How do you actually know when China is connecting the process and the ability to produce things and bringing in more of their own exquisite, innovative technologies? How do you know if they're connecting those gaps faster than the United States is?
Well, you know, it's a good thing that China as a country broadcasts its innovation. They don't broadcast all of it, but just like we don't broadcast all. But they're pretty visible because it's a matter of national pride. Right. So to China, it's not just I can build something that you can't build. I can build something that you can't build, and I'm going to let everybody know it. So that's very useful. And so when you see thousands of drones being controlled in the Chinese New Year celebration, making fancy dragons in the sky, when you see hundreds of robots dancing around with swords that are humanoids, they're telling you where they're headed, right? Their ability to dominate not just critical minerals, but battery production, their ability, right, to displace US and German auto manufacturing and EVs, their ability to go from, generation 2 to generation 3, 4, 5 plus aircraft in a very short time frame. They're not trying to hide anything, right? And so I think on the US side, we had to say, okay, not that we want to have an arms race, which we might find ourselves in, particularly on autonomous systems. I'm sure you get into this. But we not only see the gaps, but we passively admire the problem and not get on to what the solutions are. We still have the best capital markets in the world. We still have the most innovative companies in the world, right? We have the best war fighters in the world and the most advanced intelligence community the world has ever seen. So our failure is going to be because of our own doing, not because of what the Chinese are doing, but our inability to get out of our own way.
Is the failure where we were pre 9/11, where we once again have all the pieces of the puzzle, but we haven't connected them in the ways to make them more effective?
Both pre 9/11
Mm-hmm.
and pre December 7th, 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was in the World War II, it wasn't like anybody should have been surprised of what took place. We were tracking what the Japanese were doing. We knew we had to get our manufacturing in line. We were putting airplanes onto the border of Canada and letting the Canadians secretly take it away and send it to the British. We came up with all these kind of like non-rational ways to try to solve a problem rather than just admit that you have a problem and go fix it.
Yeah.
Bury our hand in the sands and pray that it goes away. Hopefully tomorrow won't look like yesterday.
Not a great strategy.
Hope it's not a great strategy.
Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about the differences in culture between Silicon Valley and Washington, because that used to be a huge gap. Is that government getting any smaller with what you've seen just recently play out in the last few weeks with the use of Anthropic and Anthropic wanting guardrails in place and the Pentagon saying we want to use your AI without guardrails, and to see the sort of still very different cultures applying? How significant is this moment, and how much is that gap, do you think, shrinking?
It's definitely shifting, right? I mean, this is very different than where we were 5 or 6 years ago between Google and the Defense Department, right? Where Maven Google just said we didn't want to do it. Okay, so that has changed. A couple things. I think what we're watching is great theater, but it's not really attacking the great problems. So when I say it's great theater, is that we have strong guardrails. 3000.09, right? We wrote about this in the AI Commission report for the National Security Commission for AI that we published 5 years ago. We were the first department of any defense or war in the world to outline standards for the use of AI and autonomous lethal weapons in the battlefield, which clearly lays out qualification requirements, lines of authority, human control and involvement, not necessarily in the loop, but on the loop or the side of the loop. And as of today, we still practice 3009. So that's one issue. Second, being a little bit critical of my technology colleagues. When I say theater, you can't say that, hey, I want to sell to the Department of War, but I don't want my stuff to be used for targeting or for weapon systems or for autonomous systems. What do you think the role of the Department of War is for? Do you think a person in the battlefield would say, hold on, let me check my manual whether I can use and deploy this system because of a contractual requirement I have, when you got 10 seconds to make a decision. All right. Now, the flip side of that, the government side, right, is look, we don't want to be like China and Russia and deploying systems that are fundamentally unsafe. The real we're not even questioning human in the loop. There's no responsibilities. There's no concepts. It's just like, let's see how it works. You know, at scale. We're not talking about onesies and twosies like we're seeing in the Middle East or in Ukraine right now. But here's the bigger thing: parties need to be honest with themselves and quit the theater and get to the real crux of the problem. I don't think anybody in the world wants a world where we have autonomous weapons running around uncontrolled, controlled by algorithms, deployed by algorithms of who lives and who dies. I don't think it's anybody's interest. This is our next Oppenheimer moment, where we have to say, this is not just about a US policy and a battle between some technologists and the Department of War. But this is something that we need to have a global dialogue on, which if we have a global dialogue on things like the use of landmines and nuclear weapons, right? Lethal autonomous weapons integrated at scale has the same sorts of dangers that those other systems that we've dealt with in the past, and generations ago we dealt with them. We need to deal with it today and be a little honest about the quality of what this AI is. Now, we hear a lot of talk where the AI companies are saying, well, we want to have guardrails, it's not, safety, we want it to be appropriately tested. They just simply say we're not ready. If they were really honest, they would say, the stuff not quite ready for prime time for these particular use cases. Great for processing information, great for, human machine teaming, great for very neural control use, but just be honest. Don't make it about a contract dispute between the department and your company.
Yeah. Haven't they said, though, that we don't feel like AI is ready, that the AI platforms we've built are ready for these tasks?
If you kind of slice through all the words they use, there's nobody saying standing up. I don't see all the AI companies together standing up and said, we're not ready for prime time. It's like, my son might not be ready, and then you get the other AI company goes, oh, we'll be happy to sell it to you. Right? And the department, but look, the department isn't stupid. The department really put these rules in place, led the world on these rules, because we're thoughtful about it. We've always been thoughtful about it. And so for somehow our good friends on the tech side to say that the department's acting irresponsibly, it's not true at all. And it's not just a Trump administration issue. We were thinking about this, way before this current administration was in place.
Mm-hmm. And you have written a set of recommendations as well that you mentioned that was published some 5 years ago that did cover a lot of these issues. That doesn't mean all the recommendations are sometimes adopted. Are you happy with what your commission that you sat on with Eric Schmidt and a number of other notables in the technology space? Are you happy with the recommendations and how they've been adopted so far?
Generally, if you get half your recommendation adopted, you're on the winning track. So the answer is, I think generally we're happy. But more importantly, the dialogue needs to continue. And the dialogue is both a public dialogue and a government dialogue and an industry dialogue. Get serious about the problem. Have necessary hearings. Do the appropriate studies. Set up the appropriate standards. If you're serious about this, you don't say, give me my $200 million and you can use it for 99% of the things that I want you to use it for.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Yeah, let me ask you, when you're thinking about the next 10, 20 years, and now I have all these images in my head of the dancing robots that China is putting out. It's pretty extraordinary, to be honest with you, because a dancing robot is one thing, one that can do break dancing and
with
jump.
the sword. With the sword.
It's really unbelievable. It looks like AI generated, right? But it's not. These things are real, we're assuming. So let me ask you, like when you're thinking about the next 10, 20 years, if we're not able to kind of close some of these gaps that exist, whether it's in technology, the ability to produce technology, as you mentioned, some of the cultural gaps, the theater, if you want to call it that, if we're not able to close some of those gaps, how do you see things rolling out over the next 10 years? I mean, 10 years feels like an eternity given how fast quickly things have changed in the last couple of years since AI adoption.
Yeah, what it's clear in 10 years, no current military wants their militaries to look like what they currently look like today. I don't know of a single country that says we got it, we got the model, right? Linear, slow progression is the way we're going to go off and protect our vital national interests. Not a single country in the world believes that. And we're looking at a great expansion in the defense of spending, right? We're looking, I mean, the U.S. may go, I think the president wanted to go from 900 billion and change to 1.5 trillion, right? But the rest of the world is going up by 50%, in some cases doubling their defense budgets. And they're not buying more of the old stuff. Everybody wants, quote unquote, the new stuff, the tritables, the smart weapon systems, the integrated defense, right? The network systems. Okay, so we're going to be in this new race to build all this capability out, right? Yet, from a human point of view, we have not sat down as groups of responsible nations, irrespective of our disputes that we have in the moment, and ask ourselves, what are the global standards of responsible use?
Okay, can I just raise my hand as a pessimist in the room on this,
Sure.
Gilman, and say, how are you going to get China, Russia, Iran, North Korea to have a responsible dialogue around these issues and trust them?
Well, start with first your own responsible use. And then how do you deal with countries who are not responsible? We did that in the nuclear arms race. We did that in other, and look, treaties sometimes are useful, sometimes they're not. What is useful is the dialogue that happens around that. That's what's the useful part. Look, there will always be rogue nations. There will always people who try to break the rules and cheat the system. This is the part of the real world that we live in, right? But at least we need to expose the dangers. You know, when we were dealing with nuclear weapons, we exposed the dangers to countries like Pakistan that say, you know what, you don't want to have a bunch of little nukes rolling around that some junior officer can turn the keys on and deploy. That would be a bad day. If I can't convince you not to have nuclear weapons, at least I can convince you what responsible use looks like, right? For your own national interest.
I think we've seen, Gilman, over the last few years. I think you'll agree with me 100% on this. Let me know if you don't. That really the dynamics have changed now. It's not really the government that can ensure U.S. national security in the future by itself. Even if it wanted to, it couldn't. With so much innovation happening in the private sector, you're now kind of sitting in a position where you're making decisions or having a hand in decisions about whether you're going to invest in certain technologies or not. So I'm asking you for some trade secrets here. When you're thinking about this new future of war like you've laid out, and you think about the essential elements that will be most needed in a new environment, and then you're thinking about a lot of these technology companies that are very innovative and creative, how are you sort of assessing how some of these companies might actually have solutions that fit into your idea of the military of the future?
I think it starts with at least a baseline vision of what the world should look like, right? If you don't, then it's like driving by the bumps in the road, where you, and you're not looking down the road. We have to look down the road, right? It's inevitable that all of these military systems are going to be built out. It's inevitable that we're going to have integrated collection systems, and we're going to be, it's not just for the intelligence, it's for business intelligence. It's going to be a global phenomenon, right? And in spite of everybody claiming to want to disconnect, those connections are, because of the fabric of information flows and influence, those are becoming tighter and tighter. So you take the assumption that this stuff is going to happen. Then the question is, in what order how should it be built out, and how do you build systems and capabilities that allow for responsible people to use these systems responsibly. And so that informs how it, look, this isn't just about like playing venture capital bingo here, right? Let's put some money down on this number here and hope that number comes true. I mean, I think that's what some people believe venture capital is. Venture capital and entrepreneurship is about having a view of the way the world could be and driving the world to that better place than where it's at. And you learn along the road, and things will change because innovations will change, and somebody will see something that you might have missed. But simply saying technology is neutral, that we're just capital, chasing the most efficient way of production, is irresponsible. So, people claim like the Defense Department is not acting responsibly, but the capitalists and the technologists also bear part of the responsibility to build out that better future. And you want to have people, you want to fund people who have those same core values you have to get us down that road, rather than, hey, I can get a 10x valuation bump this week because that's just a good way to make money.
Yeah. I think you're really clearly defining, and I'm so happy that you are, how the national security community of the future has to be much closer in terms of their agreement on that set of values. And then you'll work out, as you mentioned, you'll work out the other things along the way. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but
No,
it's
it's going to be
possible.
hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be a struggle. There's going to be pooling, and there's going to be tension, and there's going to be friction, as it should be. We don't want to be like some other countries where whatever the government wants, we're going to salute, or the other inverse is, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Companies can do whatever they want.
Yeah. Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Let's just get personal for the last couple of minutes here. And just going through some images of you that may or may not appear at the Cipher Brief Honors Awards dinner. You looked like you were about 12 years old in an interview I saw you on, Gilman, when you were really working toward the flight simulator. You were working in the gaming industry, but you came from a family of service members. So I just want to ask you, from a very personal perspective, what drives you to do what you do in the national security space today?
I do come from a family that has committed its service. My father was in the Army Air Corps in World War II, worked on B-29s as a machinist in Okinawa, and then ended up working for the Navy as a civilian. My brother served in Vietnam on the USS Ranger. And public service, whether it is to the military or to national security, has always been in my family because, many generations ago, when my ancestors came in the 1860s or 2015, depending on what side of the family you get, they came here way back in those days because the U.S. represented the opportunity, not just the opportunity for them, but a different opportunity of where the world could look like, right? Country was not perfect. It's never been perfect. But the idea of America, that vision of America, and what brings out the best in us was the thing that gave people hope. That's why the people came, right? But once you land, right, and you do what you do, and then you pass that to the next generation, who passes it to the next generation. At some point, you get, if you're fortunate enough, you're successful. So it's, I thank you for this upcoming award and other organizations that I received these awards from. But those awards were based for the sacrifices the prior generations of my family made, along with every peer they had of other families that they made, to allow us to get to the success that we're in. And the moment you forget that it was prior generations and a whole nation of families who built this country and make it about yourself, then it's game over. It's not just game over for you, it's game over for the nation.
I couldn't have said it any better than that. I think the one thing, Gilman, about getting awards and things like this, besides having those great things to sit on the bookshelf or tell people how important you were, is how inspiring you are in your roles to other people. I believe that's what the true measure of a successful leader is. If you inspire others to bring their best to the game, you have won. And you've impacted national security in ways far beyond any one mission or one thing. And I think that's really important to remember. So thank you for being such an incredible leader in this space over decades now, and for inspiring the countless people that you have, Gilman. I joke with Brad that after every conversation with you, my head hurts because I learn so much and I really have to struggle sometimes to keep up because you're that brilliant. I think you inspire us to be better. And I just want to thank you for stopping by State Secrets, letting me give you a little bit of grief, and sharing some of your insights with us today. Thank you so much, Gilman Louie.
Thank you, Suzanne.